It was a criminal act very similar to the notorious Stewart case in Boston. A couple is attacked in a Milwaukee parking lot. She is brutally stabbed to death. He is wounded. At first, police were stumped, but when they finally found the killer, the city was shocked. Tony Cox with our story.
An evening out, just dinner and a movie. But what was supposed to have been simply a break from work and the kids for Jesse and Barbara Anderson this past April became front page news in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee Fire Department.
Hi, I need an ambulance to 8901 North 76th Street.
What's wrong there?
There was stabbing in our parking lot.
Newspaper reporter Jim Stingle covered the story.
They came out of the restaurant about 10:30 at night, and they began to walk toward their car. Jesse Anderson was walking a few steps ahead of his wife, he told the police, and he put the key in the passenger side door, he said, and at that moment he heard his wife scream.
Barbara Anderson was stabbed 21 times in the face and neck. She would die of her injuries, leaving behind 3 small children. Jesse was stabbed 3 times in the chest, but he would survive and tell police that the couple had been attacked by 2 black men. It seemed so vicious and senseless, much like the attack Charles Stewart had told Boston police about 3 years earlier, when he and his pregnant wife, Carol, were leaving a birthing class. In that case, Stewart said a black man had forced the couple to drive several blocks before the man shot Carol to death, wounded Charles, and then fled. Back in Milwaukee, Jesse Anderson told police that after his attackers ran away, he pulled the weapon, a red-handled fishing knife, out of his chest. He also said that a baseball cap with the logo of the Los Angeles Clippers basketball team on it that had been found at the crime scene had fallen off the head of one of his attackers. But suspiciously, there was no robbery and no apparent motive for the attack. In Boston, police believed Charles Stewart's story and arrested a suspect, a black man with a criminal background, within days of the attack. And in Milwaukee, police also made an arrest, this time within 7 days, because 2 people who had come in contact with the attacker came forward. The first was Jim DeShazer, who owns an Army surplus store. He stocked a distinctive fishing knife that hadn't sold well. But about a month before Barbara Anderson's murder, a man had bought one from Jim's clerk, Ora Ronkowski.
I hate selling knives, and when I sell one, I kind of remember it. He looked at a yellow knife, fishing knife that we had, and then he looked at the red one, and he liked the red one better.
When Jim saw the same knife on a TV news report on the Anderson case, he called police.
When the officer came over with a picture of the knife that they had, he looked at the one that we had in the store, the other 2 knives, and he says, you know, he says, I think you got a point here. The knives looked quite similar.
Then police got another phone call, this one from a student named Tommy Miles. On the same day the Andersons were attacked, Tommy and a friend had been filling out job applications at a local mall when a stranger walked over to him.
He asked me how much my hat was worth to me, and I said, oh, about $2 or $3, $3 to $4, $3 to $4. And he said, I'll give you $20 for it. I said, okay. It was an L.A. Clippers cap that Tommy had sold that stranger. And Tommy knew that it was his cap at the scene of the crime because of a grease stain inside the brim. Then Tommy and Ora, the store clerk, both identified the man who made those purchases in a police lineup. They both pointed to the very same man. It was Barbara's husband, Jesse Anderson. But police already had their suspicions about Jesse's account. They had found bloodstains inside the Andersons' car that were inconsistent with Jesse's story of an attack outside. And
it didn't seem to make sense that this couple was attacked like this and not robbed, first of all. The fact that they had been stabbed and not shot, the fact that all of her stab wounds were to her face, suggested to the police that his story may not necessarily be true. They gave him one more chance to tell his story. He ran through the whole story again, and then they confronted him with this new information, and he was arrested.
Police charged Jesse Anderson with first-degree intentional homicide. Now, in the Stewart case in Boston, police never got that far. Charles Stewart's own brother had gone to police implicating his brother in the murder plot. The next day, Charles Stewart leapt to his death from a Boston bridge. But in Milwaukee, Jesse Anderson went on trial. A key piece of evidence brought up at the trial was a letter Barbara Anderson had written to her husband 5 years earlier. It read, in part,
Dear Jesse, I am really worried about our marriage and our relationship. Saturday night was like such a bad dream. I'm sorry it happened, but you're pushing on me, kicking me, and throwing around the knife, telling me you're going to throw me out. What came over you? Do you not see a big problem?
Anderson did not testify in his own defense. The jury deliberated 9 hours before returning its verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jesse Anderson, guilty of first degree.
The Stewart case in Boston inflamed racial tensions because police were quick to believe a white man's word. In Milwaukee, police were more cautious.
Jesse Anderson said this horrible crime was committed by 2 young blacks. But once you think, at the end, there were 2 blacks that really gave the key evidence that nailed his coffin. It's kind of ironic that it turned out like that.
The 3 Anderson children are now in the care of relatives. Jesse Anderson will be sentenced next month. He faces life in prison. Just ahead, we will go back to Bruce Springsteen's roots and find out what he's really like. And later on, we'll return to South Florida for a first-hand